While on vacation in a city 8 hours away from home with my girlfriend, we get into a small argument, and this resulted in me leaving her stranded in a downtown area in the middle of the night. I walked back to the hotel 20 minutes nearby to cool off, thinking my girlfriend would eventually make her way back soon after. However, after 2 hours, my girlfriend was escorted back by police. Turned out, her phone was on low battery, leading her to not be able to look up directions on the way back or call for an Uber. She ended up getting lost for an hour and had to later borrow a stranger's phone to call the cops for help. I felt pretty horrible leaving her there. However, given that my girlfriend is already a full functioning adult, I didn't consider the possibility of her phone being dead. She does have a bad habit of forgetting to charge her phone. I threw her a Metro card and stormed away. She ended up overreacting to the whole situation, claiming that I abused her, packing her belongings, and calling her sister on the phone to tell her about what I did. Her sister ended up blowing up my phone, calling me cruel and abusive. Mind you, I only left thinking that she'd be able to get home easily. Even though it was a couple hours past midnight, the city was still crowded with people, probably not dangerous like she exaggerated. When my girlfriend was still crying to her sister, she lied and said that she's now feared for her life, possibly implying that I threatened her. In the heat of the moment, I snatched the phone out of her hands to talk to her sister myself. She suddenly screamed to the top of her lungs, another overreaction, took her belongings, and ran out of the hotel. I chased her down, but she told me that she had already booked a flight home in the early morning and never wanted to see me again. She kept saying that I hit her when all I did was try to explain myself. Her evidence being the very tiny nail mark I left on her face when she was trying to resist, snatching her phone back and didn't let me talk to her sister. 2 hours later, a police officer knocked on my hotel room as I realized that my girlfriend had gone to the police station and reported me for domestic violence. I gave my statement and they advised me to stop contacting her for the night. I didn't want this incident to ruin my hard-earned vacation, so I decided to stay for the rest of the trip like I had initially planned. After I got back, I tried calling her sister and her mom, and they refused to hear my explanation. Her mom even told me that they're still being interviewed by the police to follow up on the domestic violence report. I heard her sister telling me over the phone that I will pay my price. What could that be? My parents are undocumented. Now I'm paranoid that her family, knowing this information, would call the anonymous tip line on my parents. Am I the asshole for getting into a small argument with my girlfriend and then leaving her stranded? Story time about when I lost my virginity to a water slide. So, do you guys know those water slides that you stand in and then they suddenly drop you straight down onto the water slide? If not, look them up on YouTube. There's nothing like them. Ah, yes, the sweet memories of my first time on one of these. I feel that my mental and emotional scars have healed enough to tell this gem. At the time, my girlfriend, now fiance, worked as a photographer for one of those resorts with the indoor and outdoor water parks. One of her perks was that her and a family member or friend could get into the water park for free. So one hot summer day she had off, we both decided it'd be fun to go there and cool down for the day. While we were there, I discovered one of their most thrilling looking water slides. Basically, you stand in this tube and then the slide operator presses a button and the slide drops you straight down like 90 feet before you actually start going down the water slide. Me, being a thrill seeker, of course, had to try it. So I made a great climb up to the top of the slide, stood in line, and finally it was my turn. Once I got in the tube, the operator told me to keep my legs crossed. Now I'm a pretty big, heavy guy, so I was like, that's uncomfortable as fuck, I'm not doing that. So there I was, standing in the tube, having a panic attack from anticipation, with my legs not crossed. The operator finally presses the button and the bottom opens and I fall straight down the water slide. Very quickly I realized why they have you cross your legs. Water shot so far up my ass, so fast, I swear I tasted it in my mouth. My body raced down that slide as I questioned every life choice I had ever made. Once I made it down to the bottom, I sat there for a moment, absolutely violated. I felt like someone in an old episode of Law & Order, Special Victims Unit. I built up the courage to finally stand up, and all I could feel was a nice warm stream of water mixed with shit, and maybe a little bit of blood shoot out of my ass faster than a steamboat geyser at Yellowstone National Park. I quickly got off the slide and ran to the bathroom with a trail of shitty water tailing me as the slide operator stared in awe. They had to shut down the slide for the rest of the day, but man was my asshole clean after that. 34 and my brother 29 got married a few years ago to literally the sweetest woman 28 in the world. A year or so ago, she was in a car accident and suffered a traumatic brain injury. She's never been quite the same. Her voice is always shaky and she stutters a lot. She can be a bit slow to process things. She needed to relearn basic tasks, just issues like that. Well, they were over at Thanksgiving and it must have been a particularly hard day for her, maybe because she was overwhelmed or something and it was difficult talking to her. Like I asked her if she wanted something to drink and she stared at me for a moment and it wasn't until my brother came and crouched down and asked her what she wanted to drink that she answered. She wanted apple juice. We didn't have any apple juice so my brother walked all the way down to the gas station to get her a bottle instead of just saying no, have water. My brother dished out her plate and when dinner was over, she volunteered to do the dishes and my brother helped too. The rest of the family went to chat in the living room and when I came to refill my glass of wine, I watched while they laughed and danced and acted like they used to. He seemed so happy doing that and less happy when he had to help her. It's just hard having to wait on her. Like we were playing some board games and she wanted to play too and so my brother had to sit there and help explain things to her. Her turns took like 10 times as long as anyone else's. When they were leaving, I was talking to my brother and I asked if he thought about getting a divorce at all and he instantly answered no and was insulted that I had asked. He's a young, good-looking guy with a good job. My sister-in-law can't do anything and she's essentially a child that he has to look after. He adjusts his work schedule to take her to her speech, occupational, physical, and regular therapy. Then he's essentially a nurse with all the work he does with her prescriptions. Aside from that, she's not working and can't do much around the house. She cleans, watches the news, and helps make desserts for funerals at her church. He even got her a dog to help keep her active. He claims she's getting better and she seems to, but she'll never be the person she was before. Am I the asshole for asking my brother to consider divorcing his wife? Story time about when I accidentally submitted hardcore furry erotica inside of my final paper. So I'm currently a 4th year computer science student at a pretty respected university and was looking to graduate this semester. One of the classes I was taking was a class in modern advancements and trends in the field of technology. While the class didn't require much heavy lifting, it was still a higher level one and required a good amount of work. For our final, our professor had assigned us a 20-page research paper into a current or possible future technology of our choice within the field. I did my paper on helium-3 power generation. I worked my ass off on this paper and in the end was super proud of it. The papers were due last night at midnight and I held off on submitting my final draft till the end because I wanted to get it as clean as possible. This is where I fucked up big time. Let me tell you a little about myself. I don't work a normal job. I tried it in my first year of school and I really didn't like it. I've worked internships when they come, but outside of that, I didn't really work. This and being a student really doesn't mix well though. For the past 3 years, I've gone by on writing hardcore erotica on commission, specifically for furries. I would write anything. Any fetish, any premise, anything. In some parts of that community, I became really popular. At one point, I was making almost $2,500 on Patreon along with the amounts I charged to my customers. Am I proud of this? No. I have written some really disgusting stuff, but it paid the bills and the money was too good to pass up. I told myself the minute I got a real job, I was cutting and running from this work. Well, this brings us to last night. I had not gotten any sleep for the past few nights. I had multiple projects due in the span of a few days. I was running on nothing but coffee and Rockstar. I was nothing more than a walking corpse and wanted to do nothing but sleep. I ended up doing my last read over of my final paper and submitted it before sleeping. However, instead of submitting my final paper, I somehow submitted one of the commissions I was working on. This commission is not light either. It's almost 10 pages long and contains a variety of things including vor and scat. So I went to bed. Submissions for the final locked and my academic career was sentenced to death then and there. When I woke up this morning, I checked my grades for my other classes before noticing an email from my professor. All it says was to come to his office after class today. I want to fucking die right now. I don't know how I'm going to explain why instead of my final, I submitted a hardcore erotic story with a wolfman jacking off in a dragon's stomach. But yeah, I fucked up big time. My girlfriend comes from a wealthy background and grew up with maids, chefs, chauffeurs, etc. I was raised in a completely opposite environment and still adjusting to dating someone like her. When we were not with her parents, we spent a lot of time at one of her apartments. Here's the issue. My girlfriend likes to walk around home barely wearing anything, which is fine. Awesome even. But she does this even when the help are around. For example, last month her family hired a new driver for her. He stopped by the apartment to introduce himself. She was only wearing underwear. Keep in mind, this is the first time they've met in person. I felt awkward. He was visibly awkward and she didn't give a shit at all. She was casually chatting to him while scrolling away on her phone. She does this all the time. She doesn't think that she needs to wear any decent amount of clothes at all when people that work for her are around. She will casually walk around wearing just a thong or a tiny crop top. Just a crop top, nothing else. She even does this with complete strangers. One time she opened the door for the delivery guy wearing only a see-through gown. You could see everything. Afterwards, I talked to her about it and she was utterly confused as to why I felt uncomfortable. Then she laughed and told me to stop being a jealous baby. She even said that I'm being unreasonable. We had another discussion about this yesterday and I told her that she probably wouldn't feel comfortable if I did the same. She said that she doesn't understand why I care what her staff think and that it never even crossed her mind that this is inappropriate. She told me that she only does this in the comfort of her own home and not in front of actual people. So she doesn't consider the people that work for her actual people. She got kind of mad at me and vented to her friends. According to all of them, I'm weird for having a problem with this and an asshole for telling my girlfriend to cover up. Somehow, I'm the villain of this story. Am I the asshole for telling my girlfriend to cover up her body when strangers enter the home? When I was 19, I had an unexpected pregnancy. My ex didn't want to keep the baby, but I did and we stayed together anyway. She was born with a birth defect and died at 2 days old. Since I knew my ex never wanted her, I definitely blamed him, which was wrong. I was upset he didn't care like I did. I ended up cheating with a guy at a support group whose young child also died. I take full responsibility. We broke up and I took a break from relationships and pursued personal therapy. My ex is married now, yet every relationship I've been in since, 3 including my fiance, he's messaged the guys warning them that I'm a cheater, and the second time he even messaged the guy's parents. Both the relationships ended shortly after, and now he's contacted my fiance, who I actually told ahead of time and he understands. I found out the reason why he's been able to find out about all my relationships is because he follows a ton of my family members on Facebook. However, I don't have a Facebook. Do I tell everyone to block him? I tried to talk to him about it and he says if I don't tell them, I'm lying by omission. But that was 10 years ago. He says that it says something about my character that can't be fixed with time. I went to therapy. It was horrible circumstances and I honestly don't think that I'm a bad person. I don't know if it would be wrong to talk to his wife. I'm afraid he's going to tell my fiance's parents or my future kids. I just want him to stop. What would you do? My ex-fiance cheated on me with my cousin and now my family wants me to forgive him because he's sick with cancer. I'm 27 and don't have any siblings, but I have a cousin named Kevin. He's 2 years younger than me and we literally grew up together. I spent a lot of time with my dad's side of the family as my mom is deceased and my dad never remarried because of his health issues. I was there with Kevin most of the time and we did everything together. I've always been very close with my grandparents as well, so I was very comfortable being there. When I was engaged to my ex-fiance, I used to bring her over to my grandparents' house most of the time. Her, me, and Kevin would spend our time doing things together. I noticed Kevin would try to take part in personal conversations and try to tag along whenever we went out for dinner. I set some boundaries, but he just kept stomping over them. He tried to pick fights with me and claim I'm forgetting about him and prioritizing my ex over him, and I didn't know how to deal with this, so I kept my distance. In about 2 months, I found out from my aunt about Kevin constantly meeting up with my ex, and she told me that she was worried something was going on between Kevin and my ex-fiance, and she was right. Turns out, my ex and Kevin got together while I was being kept in the dark while I was planning our wedding and handing out invitations. I felt like an absolute idiot. I couldn't handle my anger and I stopped everything and cut contact with Kevin and the family, except my dad because he needed me. I heard that Kevin was in and out of the hospital, but I didn't know why. That was until my aunt reached out to me telling me that Kevin has liver cancer and wasn't handling it well. I drove my dad to visit him once and saw my ex, who's now his girlfriend, there, and I left right away. I kept my distance, and recently I started getting calls from the family members asking, "Did you hear about Kevin?" and telling me the same story. My grandmother called me wanting to arrange for a family dinner on Christmas, and because Kevin got out of the hospital, they wanted me to come home hoping that I solved my issues with him, seeing that I may not be able to do it later. However, I refused. She told me that I needed to have some empathy and let go of the past because what happened to him was enough for me to let it go. They started pressuring me from all sides. I told my grandparents that I won't sit with my ex-fiance and the person who wronged me at the same table and pretend to be a happy family. They replied that I was resentful, that he's my cousin no matter what happens. It's the same people who allowed my ex into their house after what she did and sided with Kevin and said that they only allowed my ex into the house for Kevin's sake. Now they demand that I get right with him because he clearly deserves more sympathy than I do. I'm deeply hurt and I can't imagine sitting at the same table with the people who hurt me the most. What should I do at this point? I think everyone is being unfair and refusing or just ignoring what Kevin did to me.